Okay. All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being patient with us here as we're waiting for our quorum to arrive after our, what seems like a very extended session this morning. We'll begin with prayer, and I've asked Representative McCollum, Secretary of this committee, if he would open us up with a word. And what's your number?
I know. Dear Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for everything you do for us. Please give us wisdom as we look at the state's business. I want to thank you for watching over our families. Please be with our soldiers that are abroad. And thank you, Lord, for us being born in Georgia and doing the state's business. In God's name, Jesus Christ, amen.
Thank you. Before we begin, I've got a quick announcement to committee members. You should have there at your desk an announcement about the House Transportation Committee dinner on February 21st. Just for your information, if you haven't RSVP'd, please do that by next Wednesday. And we have 3 items on the agenda for today. We will begin with Senate Bill 353. Senator Dolezal was not able to join us today, but Representative Thomas is going to present the bill for him. And if it sounds familiar, it's because it was something that we took up last year, and I believe came out unanimously from this committee. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Very good. Okay. Okay, whenever you're ready.
All right. Can you hear me? Great. So I'm here to present Senate Bill 353. As the chair lady mentioned earlier, this was basically a reincarnation of HB 52, which I presented past the House. I believe it was unanimous past the House floor as well. We had a little issue with some Senate language that, let's say, wasn't preferable maybe to the governor's office. So this version of this got all worked out. So I've been asked to present it, and I will. Section 1. It basically updates the code, so that way we're no longer in 1980, and this gets us up to like 2001. And it says that notice of such meetings shall be sent via email to members versus having, old classic snail mail. So that's Section 1. Section 2 updates the code so that way the Georgia Department of Transportation can have multiple meetings or proposal revisions. That way they're not limited to, because many times in the proposal process there's refinements that need to be made. So this makes sure that's codified, so that's allowed. It's basically cleanup language. See Section 3. I'm actually let my friend over here at GDOT explain Section 3, because there's been a lot with that one.
Yep. So Section 3 just deals with 3 years ago, y'all codified alternative contracting methods, construction manager, general contractor, pre-development agreement, comprehensive development agreement. And this just clarifies when the restrictions apply. So there's a cap of 5% of the value of the prior year's funds that are in the capital programs that can be used on a CMGC. And then the frequency of how often the department can authorize a procurement as a CMGC. There was an amendment in the Senate so originally the bill had stated that it allowed a waiver once every 10 years. The Senate felt very strongly that it should be once every 100 years. It was an acceptable amendment. So that was a change from the other. Otherwise, that's what that section does.
And moved along to Section 4. This extends the length of modular or sectional housing units to 80 feet in length. And just to be very clear, modular sectional housing has really no weight impact with that extra 4 feet, so it doesn't have any effect on any other trailer weights or things we've discussed in the past. Let's see, Section 5 adds the allowability for coroner or medical examiner to delegate their powers such that if it keeps from a blocked interstate from being blocked in traffic. So that's to prevent that. And the final one is really just to make sure that data through the Department of Transportation, records of data for the State Road Tollway Authority or SRTA, that vehicle information, personally identifiable information, isn't available via to anyone. So we're just trying to keep a privacy thing there, and that's pretty much the bill in a nutshell. I take questions.
All right, thank you, Representative Thomas. Does anyone have a question? Okay, Representative Fry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate you clarifying this Section 3 for us, but I'd like to get, what's an example of a project that you would need to waive that requirement? And is the Senate, by changing this, encumbering GDOT from being able to conduct their job properly? Because I think 10 years is a pretty good number. 100 seems sort of weird.
So the original version of the bill that got vetoed last year said just once, and then there was an amendment in the Senate to clarify what once means, and that added a bunch of stuff that ultimately made the bill a bill of concern to the governor's office. For the department's purpose, we'd only envision needing potentially do this for one particular project, and it deals with that 5% cap. So we were content with the change. And at the end of the day, so if you think about a 10-year period, if we find we get 10 years from now and we've exercised our once in 100 years, we would come back to General Assembly and ask for favorable consideration to go back and change.
Okay. Just want to make sure we're not stopping y'all from being able to function properly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the presenter of the bill?
Okay.
I see none. Is there a motion at this time?
Second.
Chairman Corbett?
Do pass.
Motion to pass. We have second. Is there any more discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed say no. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, we've got two presentations. I do know that some of you have got committee meetings that you need to get to, Ways and Means, and maybe some others. So thank you for being here. We're going to have... Go ahead. Yeah. Ways and Means is over, I just heard. So, okay, we're going to move on to a presentation from our state bridge engineer, Mr. Don Diggeman. We are looking very forward to hearing what you've got to say about our bridges.
If I can, Madam Chair, I'll just jump in for just a second.
Sure.
While he's getting set up, just to tee it up, obviously our state bridge engineer had worked with the chair, vice chair on the topic, and a lot of questions. Past couple of sessions, a lot of discussion about bridges and the process for posting bridges and understanding that process. I think there's been a lot of folks who've been engaged in the conversation and a lot of questions. So hopefully with this presentation, as we had talked through before, it will walk through the very circumscribed, structured approach to going and evaluating bridges so that everyone has an understanding and can ask questions to better understand the process. So that's all I wanted to say. I think you'll find, though, as you listen to the presentation and look at the pictures and hear firsthand accounts of how this process goes, that it should really help everyone better understand that process and how that translates into things. Y'all are familiar with the phrase posting of bridges. You'll understand more about that process.
You have a question? The Chairman Prince.
Thank you, Josh. Before he gets into that, will he go into anything about requiring the specifics about requiring a bridge or asking for, hey, we want a bridge built here to here?
Not to that.
Right,
Not
he
to
won't
that.
go to that. Who sort of, is that, we'll come back to you guys about?
Yeah, we can follow up later about.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that, ma'am.
All right. Thank you, Josh, for that. All right. Thank you for being here. If you just want to tell us a little bit about bridges so that we have a clear understanding.
Yes, ma'am. So, good afternoon, Madam Vice Chair Hagan and members of the Transportation Committee. My name is Don Diggeman, as stated before, as GDOT State Bridge Engineer, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of GDOT today. This presentation emphasizes the importance of performing bridge inspections and load ratings. which are required under federal safety regulations. So we have 3 topics listed, and we'll go through this in order. The why, the history, discusses the history of tragic events that led to the necessity for bridge inspections, load ratings, and federal regulations. The what explains the length of bridges that are required to be inspected and reporting of material defects and deteriorations of bridge components. And then the how discusses training and procedures, data collection and analytics, and engineering analysis. And what's not listed here is later on the show and tell of a bridge inspection with pictures by one of our GDOT inspectors. And he sits right next to me, and his name is Josh Kofer. Okay, sorry. Let me step you through this timeline right here. And there's some important events that leads us to the regulation for inspection, safety inspection of bridges. The first date, the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956 started the development of the interstate system. The next date, and I'm going to read through this because it's important. On December 15th, 1967, disaster struck the community of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. As people were heading home from work in heavy traffic, the Silver Bridge collapsed, resulting in 46 deaths of 46 people. A single eye-bar had a defect that was no more than 0.1 inches. And just to stop there, 0.1, if people still carry around change, is equivalent to 2 dimes stacked up against, next to each other. So not very much of a defect, but it took that bridge down. This one defect led to the failure of the eye-bar and ultimately the bridge. As a point of reference, as I stated, 0.1 is equivalent to thickness of 2 dimes. Due to this tragic event, Congress decided to include the first National Bridge Inspection Program in U.S. history in the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1968. It authorized U.S. DOT to develop standards for the safety of bridges, which culminated in the 1971 publication of the National Bridge Inspection Standards, which we call the NBIS. These inspection standards contain 116 items that must be reported to FHWA on an annual basis for every bridge structure in every state. Georgia has an additional 240 inventory items that we use to help track and manage our bridges. The standard includes inspection, organization, qualifications of bridge inspection personnel, and all inspection and load rating procedures. In 2007, the I-35 West Bridge collapse in Minneapolis further placed a spotlight on continuing vigilance on bridge safety inspections. And then lastly, on March 2022, FHWA published a major revision to the inspection program. The National Bridge Inspection Standard, the NBIS, will be replaced with the specifications of National Bridge Inventory, which is what we call SNBI, which will increase the current 116 federally inventory items to 150, and must be completed by, the transition must be completed by March 2028. So very much a heavy lift in that change. So why do we inspect and load rate bridges? Well, it's required by Title 23 CFR 650 subpart C. That's a mouthful to say. The regulation focuses on and provides a framework to perform the inspections of load rating. Georgia DOT inspects both local and state bridges to provide consistency in inspections and overall customer service. This is not required by federal regulation, and we do this free of charge of the local government. What is inspected? The National Bridge Inspection Standard and the specifications of National Bridge Inventory spells out the guidelines for inspection and load ratings. Per these guidelines, the definition of a bridge to be inspected is a minimum of 20 feet. Now, based, as you can see in the pictures, it's not necessarily just a bridge that we can expect. It could be different configurations of a culvert or a pipe, but at bare minimum, it has to meet that 20-foot definition. Inspections are routinely performed every 24 months. Other necessary types of and frequencies are based on structure and material types. Defects and deterioration. Scheduled inspections are performed to document material defects and deterioration, to record the conditions of bridge and evaluate its safety over its lifespan. This information helps determine the necessary repairs, rehabilitation, replacement, closure, or weight restrictions on a bridge. In other words, posting. The how, inspector training. We heavily invest in training inspectors to help determine the safety of our bridges. There are 5 courses the inspectors are required to take. Most are multi-day events with both classroom instruction reinforced with field exercises. Now turning to the decision-making process with all this data that we've acquired. The data from inspection and engineering analysis of load rating allows us to determine the posting, closure, replacement, or repair actions for bridges. The decision is a fact-based, data-driven process with several layers of reviews. This can be seen on the next slide that shows the bridge inspection workflow. The first 3 steps involve the planning, scheduling, and inspection of bridge or structures by the bridge inspectors. A draft inspection is written and submitted to GDOT and FHWA, reviewers who are responsible for the next 4 phases, which involve quality control and assurance. The reviews are to ensure that GDOT is compliant with federal inspection policies, our inspectors are accurate, and that any issues within our bridge inspection programs are addressed. Georgia DOT does 100% quality control on all inspection reports. Federal regulations only require a random sample set for quality control. Multiple and repeated noncompliance may result in partial or complete federal funds withholding until compliance is reestablished. How is the data collected? Well, we start off with what we call element level bridge inspection data. It's just a fancy term for we get into the weeds as far as collecting the data. The data is quantified defects and deterioration of bridge components as shown on the table to the left on the slide. Examples of bridge components are a bridge deck, traffic rail, or joints. There are 4 condition states designated as good, fair, poor, and severe. That a defect or deterioration can be rated for a bridge component. You can think of this as the bridge's report card. Just the next step to this, and not to be confused with the condition states from the previous slide, are the condition ratings. And these are the overall ratings of the component areas of a bridge, which we call the deck, superstructure, and substructure. This is like the bridge's student ranking, i.e. honor roll, salutatorian, or valedictorian. The condition ratings are good, fair, and poor. Condition ratings range from a 9, which is a good, to a 0, which is a poor, and essentially a closed bridge. The table you see presented on the slide shows 7s for all 3 components, which equates to a bridge that is in condition rating of good. The rating states help determine the condition states. Let me correct myself on that. The condition states help determine the condition rating of the 3 main areas of the bridge. So to take a step back, we start with detailed documentation of defects and deterioration from the inspectors, and as they document all that, they hone in or funnel in into a decision on those 3 component areas, whether it's good, fair, or poor. But all that is based on their observations of defects and deterioration. All of you should have a sample bridge inspection report. What's on the slide is not the same as what you have in your hand, but very similar. And you see there's a lot of data in the 3 pages that on the slide, and also what you have as a handout that's collected and used to make decisions on bridges. There is a focus and quality-driven effort to collect and produce these reports. And just stay with me. Pictures are next. Engineering analysis, the load rating. So in the SNBI defines load rating as the analysis to determine the safe vehicular live load carrying capacity of a bridge using bridge plans and supplemented by measures and other information gathered from the inspection. So it's all interconnected. Our inspection reports, our data feeds into our load rating. Once again, safety is the primary intent and focus of the federal regulation. Load rating, as you can see it, is the math portion of the safety inspection guidelines and provides an evaluation of each bridge component's capacity. Defects and deterioration are incorporated into load ratings to keep track of the safe loading capacity of a bridge. Load rating is the primary tool to determine posting weight restrictions on a bridge. And what's shown here is just what we call an org chart for our folks in bridge maintenance, all the inspectors. There's roughly about 45 inspectors. They do all the work. This is all in-house. And we inspect state and local bridges all across the state of Georgia. Now let me hand it over to Josh Kofer to go through some pictures and what the inspectors are doing here. Josh?
Thank you, Don. So basically just going to walk you through a basic inspection that we do every day. So usually when we go out to a bridge, we will walk the entire deck. We'll walk both shoulders if needed, depending on width of the deck. We'll check in for any defects up there on top where the cars are driving, any impact on the bridge rails. And then as you can see in this picture, we'll go underneath. We'll look at the beams, the super, the sub, anything that's in the water. We try to get our hands on every component of the bridge and look at every single piece of it to get a good data for everyone. We have ladders that we can put up there to look at beams and caps, anything like that. Anything over 26 feet, our specialized team takes over, and we'll have bridges that are on specialized, and they'll look at specific sections of the bridge that we can't reach from a ladder, and they have special equipment that they can get up hands on. And then anything over 3 feet of water, we have 2 dive teams, and they will look at those components, anything underwater that we can't get to. But you can see we throw on waders, and we'll walk across creeks, anything that we can reach, we will take a look at. Here you see this bridge was hit by a vehicle. You can see some of the damage on the beams. I'm up there on actually some of our specialized equipment, basket truck, and I'm sounding those beams to make sure there's no loose concrete. Any of that loose concrete I'll pull off to make sure it doesn't fall into traffic, and also use that to see if there's any rebar exposed to get very detailed measurements of what may be exposed so that we can get a plan for anything that needs to be fixed. And if there is exposed steel, a lot of times we'll spray that with spray paint just to keep it from corroding as best we can until repairs can be made for that bridge. Here we got 2 guys, they're doing what we call bridge soundings. We will drop a tape measure and measure from the deck surface to the ground. And we do that in front and behind every bent across the bridge on both sides of the bridge. And what that does for us is that gives us a basic channel profile, and we keep that information year to year, and that will show us if there's any scour, if we're losing fill around those abutments and around those columns, or it could be silting in. Either way, we'll be able to make any plans we need to correct any of that we need to do, but we do that on every bridge that has a waterway going under it. And then just a basic picture of me in a culvert. This is under an interstate somewhere. I don't know where. I have no point of reference. But, yeah, we walk through the culverts, and in there with spiders and critters, and not a job for everybody, but we enjoy it. I have fun doing it. But yeah, I mean, we'll walk through. If there's 4 barrels, we'll walk through every one of them. I got a 3-man team. A lot of times we luck up, there's 3 barrels. We'll each take one, and my guys know to take pictures with their phones. We get to the end, and we'll compile data for what they found, what I found, and get it all compiled together on a bridge report. If there's more than 3, then we'll turn around and go back and walk the ones we didn't see. So that's basically what we do every day.
Well, thanks, Josh. So, and thank you, Madam Vice Chair Hagan, and members of the Transportation Committee for your time and attention this afternoon. Again, that concludes our presentation. I welcome any questions from the committee.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And you will have a couple of questions. I'd like to start by asking a question about the ratings. It's on several slides in, how is the data collected? So are the ratings subjective, or are they based on information that you put into the system in accordance with federal regulations? How do you come up with the number? I think you said it was 9 down to 0.
Yes, ma'am.
How do you do that?
It's based on the inspection data that Josh and his team would gather, and based on that one slide where we have that workflow, there's multiple reviewers that look at it to make sure that we hone in on a band as far as whether it's a 9 or an 8 or 7 or so forth. So a lot of it is a back and forth, and then also we've got FHWA who comes behind us and does a random sample test to say, hey, we agree with your approach, but it is all fact-based from what we gather out in the field.
Okay, thank you. All right, I will start with Chairman Prince.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you guys for what you do and your presentation today. Couple of quick questions. You mentioned, Mr. Don, that Georgia inspects all bridges. They're not required to do, I guess, the locals. Is that so? Now, so if they're not required, I mean, I know you do it and we appreciate that, but is there a consequence if they don't fix something that's broken, i.e. the local folks?
That's correct. I alluded to it earlier. If there's non-compliance,
Right.
There potentially could be federal funds being withheld, whether it's just for that county or for the state as a whole.
Okay, good. And the last, and Madam Chair, just one more quick one. Rail bridges, and I know, did you, trucks and stuff go, we got that. But what about the rail, the CSX, the Norfolk Southerns? Do you guys inspect those bridges as well, or is that something totally out of your lane? Thank you.
So I'll start off, and Josh can chime in. We do inspect those for certain items, mainly what we call horizontal offset and vertical clearance. But the railroad bridges, the overall inspection is under the purview of the railroad agency. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, only thing I might add is we go out and we do take verticals and check everything, and we'll look around. I mean, we don't have as much data as we do in some of these reports, but we look around, make sure there's nothing detrimental, and the railroad does a good job of keeping their bridges up. They take a look at their own bridges.
Getting hit. I don't know why, if it's not high enough or what, but that's another story. It's a rail bridge.
Was that?
Floor Leader McDonough, you have a question?
Sure. I just want to thank Don. I took a picture of just this right here, and I sent it to my sons at the Citadel, and I said, what is this? And he sent back, would that be a RESONANCE, whatever that word is, frequency for a bridge? So my investment is working there, that they did know what that was. And the other son says, that's taking the derivable, whatever that means. So I'm just glad my money going to the Citadel they knew exactly both boys knew exactly what that is. So thank you, Don. I can sleep tonight.
No, well, and you opened the door. We appreciate it. We do frankly speaking, need more engineers. So if they need a job, just let us know.
What's it pay?
That might be something y'all need to talk about offline. But I think you are making a wise investment in the Citadel.
Thank you.
Mhm. All right, Representative Seabaugh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Donnelly, you're just bragging now. When you build bridges, how is the load rating determined when you're building that bridge?
So obviously, build a new bridge, it's going to be what we call that 9 or 8. It's brand new, hadn't had traffic on it. We determine, if I got your question correctly, the load rating based on the plans that was used to build it. Now, just like a car that you drive off the lot, give it a year or two, then you may start see some cracking on your deck or any kind of concrete. A lot of that is not detrimental at first, and then we do have proactive, hey, we start looking at, let's seal those cracks so it doesn't get any worse. But to answer your question, we take the plans that were used to build a bridge, we use that to load rate that bridge, the first initial load rating.
And one more question, is there any way to upgrade the load rating of a bridge once it's been built? Can you make it where it can carry heavier loads?
You can, a lot of times it's repairing it or doing rehab actions to get it back to where it was before. There are ways to potentially increase its capacity. It gets to a point where you're doing a benefit to cost ratio. If I do all this work to strengthen it versus replace it, and just go back and forth on that.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Who is that over there on 27? Is she Representative Thomas? Go ahead. You are now.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much for being here today. I appreciate the testimony. I just have a couple questions for you. You talked a lot about visual inspection, which is pretty much what I'm hearing you do outside of maybe some sounding, where you're taking actual physical measurements. But how does the visual inspections that you conduct, how does that translate to the engineering analysis on the load ratings, and how does that plug into this formula?
So, in certain cases, we can take what the plans originally had for, let's say, certain width of a member, but then through our inspections, parts of that width of that member is gone. So we'll take that width and then that deterioration, subtract that, run the engineering analysis, and see what the capacity, the updated capacity would be. But we also always take a step back. Is the engineering, is what the formulas tell me field accurate? Does it reflect what's out there? And then we go back and forth. A lot of times, what's out in the field matches our engineering analysis with the deterioration introduced into those equations. Sometimes they don't match. Sometimes we have to go out there and potentially do what we call non-destructive testing to see if there's corrosion in the rebar. Let's just say, is it advanced in coastal counties where we have cracks in our what we call concrete piles? A lot of times we will just have to open up the piles to see if that that reinforcement is still there in that corrosive environment. And I don't know if I answered that question, but we do take that all into account and make sure the equations, the engineering matches reality, and vice versa.
Yeah, because I was just, there's a difference between visual and maybe taking some empirical data, whether it be NDT or whatnot. So how, just, and this is more just general conversation, but how do you know how to treat localized corrosion or issues, fatigue issues, versus like something that's more uniform across, which is more kind of what I think of as, the uniform is easy, but you start getting the localized issues. Like, can you kind of go in a little bit about that and talk about it a little?
So what's very important is where that localized corrosion may be. Let's say for a beam, if the localized corrosion that you're seeing in the rebar, or even for steel beam, is what we call at the middle or midspan. That's where you have your most force, or what we call moment. That could be a lot more detrimental than localized, let's say, closer to the end. But in that sense too, if you have, again, using a steel beam, if you have a lot of corrosion, what we call section loss, you're losing your material at the end of the beam, then we start looking at, well, do you still have a load path? Because that beam where at the end where it's supporting, if you're losing that, then you lost your support, if that makes sense. So it is very critical at what location, how much of that corrosion is happening. And we go back into our engineering, look at that, how much is it reduced its capacity? Does it make sense? But again, I'm not sure if I answered your question.
No, it's okay. It's just we're just we're all trying to learn here. So I guess my only other question for you is I've heard you talk a lot about corrosion, but it seems like there's more than one failure on bridges. You got corrosion, but one of the ones that we heard about a lot last year was fatigue failure.
Correct.
Could you kind of maybe talk to the committee a little bit about fatigue versus corrosion?
So in the very technical sense, as far as fatigue affects what we call steel materials a lot more than concrete. But let me frame that first with steel. We always look at what we call fracture critical for steel, or it's since changed to non-redundant steel tension members. That has been present before, and a lot of our steel structures are considered fracture critical. We have specialized inspections for that, for those certain sections or details. Always look on the lookout for that. We also try to replace those bridges. There's a lot of investment in inspection on that, and risk. So looking at it from a steel member. Now, overall, how we were using that term fatigue from last year, in that case, that's more of the wear and tear of a bridge.
Right. Yeah, that was the issue that was brought up a lot last year. So I was just trying to make sure the committee kind of understood the difference between the two. So thank you for your answer. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Thank you for those questions and discussion. I have a quick question. Going back to what I asked earlier about ratings. So if you've, help me understand, if you've got multiple inspectors putting their eyes on a bridge, and you all receive the same training, of course, but depending on perspective, opinion, or maybe weather conditions, I guess there could be many different variables. What equipment do you all have as you're taking measurements and assessing a bridge? What equipment do you have available to you, to your team, to make sure that these the ratings are as objective as possible, and that there isn't so much opinion involved?
Yeah, so as far as the elements ratings go, the feds have a manual that they put out, and they get very specific on what size crack is a state 1, what size crack is a state 2, from this size to this size, the length of it and how close together they are. They break it down to each one of the items very specifically, so it's not as much opinion when we go to elements. You read the manual, and if you have a crack that's 0.02 and it's a foot long, and you look in the manual and it says that crack is in this state. So you can kind of make that not as much a judgment call, but we have crack gauges that have different size markings on them. We can stick down there to tell us exactly how big that crack is, using tape measures, different things like that to measure lengths and how far apart they are. Then when it comes to the ratings, they're also very specific on that. A 9 rating means the bridge has no problems. An 8 means this. 7 means a few little things. 6, you're getting a little, it kind of breaks down each one of those codes and what they mean. So there is, with the elements, in my opinion, there's not very much objective opinion. It's very specific. When you get into the ratings, you get a little bit of judgment call, but I've been doing this for 11 years now, and you kind of get a feeling that we all kind of see things the same way. that, you know, if you have, I look at it by percentage. If I have 5% of my deck is in a state 2, well, that's not going to step my rating down. If I got 80% of it in a state 2, well, now I'm stepping down to the next, you know, the next level. And, you know, you just kind of use that judgment. And then, of course, I'm training 2 other guys that are coming up. As we go through this, we have plenty of meetings on this, you know, on ratings. And the feds always like to agree with us. And I think most of the time when they come out for Fed review, they usually do. So it's kind of, I think they're trying to make it less subjective with the ratings. It's one of those kind of judgment areas, but it's based off a lot of experience over people doing this 100 years before I got here.
Okay, so you feel like those regulations have enough specificity in them that
absolutely,
that it doesn't vary so much by inspector?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
yes, ma'am.
Thank you for
and
that.
And they go over that in the 2-week class that we take. They beat it into your head. The feds do. So you kind of get a pretty good idea of what they're looking for before you get out there looking at bridges.
All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I've got Representative McCollum.
Thank y'all for the presentation. I just had a quick question. So, when you're inspecting a bridge, does traffic come into play? I have a bridge in my district that goes over 985, and it's probably don't have, I don't know obviously the traffic count, but I would say 20 cars a day that goes over it, and it goes to a dead end, and they're replacing it. And I just felt like a $7 million investment in a bridge that does that. Is that something that comes into play, or is this the bridge is out of date? It's out of date. And the second question would be, can you, if you had a bridge that was iffy, could you not switch it to a 1 lane with a traffic light or something? I'm just curious.
So the 2 questions there. The first, yes, traffic does get into our selection of replacements. So do a lot of other things as far as condition of that bridge. I believe, if I remember the one that you're speaking of, there was some issues with it as far as what we call the substructure. We're seeing some cracking there that alluded to that maybe it had less capacity than what was shown on the plans. But to reinforce that, yes, that whether it's 20 cars a day or 40,000 cars a day, that does go into our decision matrix as far as replacement and rehab or posting or closing a bridge. Secondly, remind me on the second question. Never mind. Switching the traffic pattern, we've certainly done that on when we've had some emergency or damage repairs temporarily. If one of those pictures Josh was showing you, if the hit was on one side of the bridge and you have enough room, we'll take traffic off that one side, make sure that the influence of traffic doesn't get to that damaged beam, and we'll make it either, like you said, a 1 lane with traffic light or reduced lanes, 1 each way, if that makes sense. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, unless Chairman Jaspers has a question, you do not. We've got an appropriations meeting coming up very soon, so I'm going to do one more question, and that is from Representative Byrd.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your presentation. This is all fairly new to me, but if I remember correctly, last year we had a whole very long meeting on bridges, and it had to do with truck weight. And they talked about the amount of bridges that we have, that they had concern about increasing any truck weight. As of right now, how many bridges are in serious need of repair from our last meeting, talking about all of these bridges?
Well, let me parse that out. We ended up posting, based on HB 189, 733 bridges. That said, posting does not mean immediate failure. What it does mean is that we're restricting certain loads on that bridge to lessen the acceleration of the deterioration.
So just a quick follow-up. So within Georgia right now, do we have a lot of bridges that need repair? And I mean, I'm sure there's many people that cross those bridges on a daily basis that would be concerned.
So based on our numbers currently, we're about 3% poor, but it is an investment. Commissioner has come and spoken. To keep them in a state of good repair, you want to get ahead of the curve than being behind the curve. So to your point, we don't have a lot that are in serious need of repair. We do have some, but we want to be proactive rather than reactive, and making sure that we plan ahead for our replacements before they get to that point.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Diggeman, Mr. Kofer, for your presentation, committee, for the good questions and discussion. We appreciate you being here with us today.
Thank you.
We have one more presentation, and that is from Janine Miller, Planning Director, GDOT. She's going to talk to us about the freight plan. Thank you for being here with us today. And if you would just,
Thank you.
yeah, get that mic really close.
Thank you for having me.
Go ahead when you're ready.
Uh-oh. Oh, Abby's, sorry, Abby. Thank you. Alrighty, as Abby's pulling that up, I want to say thank you for all of your interest and time you spend on transportation for the state, for metro areas, for rural areas, for people, for freight. And my job as Director of Planning at Georgia DOT predominantly relates to roads. If there's intermodal work that's in rail, transit, and aviation, that happens at GDOT's Intermodal Division. They do a fantastic job there. So mostly the work that I do is around road and bridge planning. And I want to make sure that you all are aware, and I'll have Tyler share this postcard here with the QR code that shows, that will get you to our freight plan that we just, freight planning analysis that we just published on GDOT's website. It really does take a unique and very new look at the freight movements we have on our roads, from a business standpoint. I'm going to talk with you a little bit about that today. There we go. Great. Thank you, Abby. So I'll talk with you about our freight planning analysis and other studies that are underway, but I want to start with the why, really. In the past year, as you all know, we've been ranked as the #1 state for business, 10th year in a row. 426 companies expanded or located in Georgia. $24 billion of private investment announced in fiscal year 2023. 38,000 jobs. Now, what's so important, how that impacts our transportation network, is that 21.7 billion of that private investment are in logistics-enabled facilities. In other words, inbound cargo, outbound commodities and goods are what make that business operate and employ Georgians. So 90% of the private investment last year was in logistics-enabled facilities, and 80% of the jobs. So that breaks down in manufacturing and automotive, 17.3 billion and 23,000 jobs. Logistics and distribution, that's predominantly around retail, but it also involves some distribution for manufacturing, $2.3 billion by 47 companies that will create 4,200 jobs. And of course, Georgia's most important industry is also growing in agribusiness and food processing, with $1.3 billion of investment by 57 companies. As these facilities are constructed and come online and operate, more and more trucks and trains will be necessary to serve those facilities. And it is, yes, certainly that economic development growth, but it is also population growth, where we're going to, in the next 25 years, add 3 million more new, residents to the state of Georgia. It's growth throughout the southeast that generates truck growth, but we're seeing it significantly here in the state. The Port of Savannah, of course, remains the fastest growing port in the U.S. By 2030, we think they're going to have 9 million TEUs per year. That's a 20-foot equivalent unit, or half of a container. It's getting close to the size of the Port of New York and New Jersey at that point. And manufacturing and agriculture growth, as I alluded to. So all of these pressures of growth are what we are looking at as we plan and think about our future transportation network. So we are carrying out our freight planning based on 3 tenets. foundational, catalytic, and innovative. So foundational, what does it take, from a business standpoint, what does it take to continue to run the business, to maintain our roads and ensure that the facilities that we have, the footprint of roads and bridges we have, maintain in good condition and are safe. Catalytic is how we continue to grow the business and invest for all that growth that's occurring in both people and freight moving on our facilities, as well as innovative. So we think about this in a business of R&D. What are the next new things that we should be thinking about to serve our customers and delight our customers, so to speak, related to safety technologies, connected autonomous vehicles, potentially in the future, electrification, NEVI. Some of you may have heard of the NEVI program, National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure for charging throughout the state. So we think about our investments along each of these lines. And to make sure that we're making decisions in those frameworks with the best data available, we procured or accessed public data, 24 sources that have been both populated by private sector and are used by private sector as they make decisions for their customers, for their fleets, for their strategic investments and operations. And we found many, many important and interesting insights from that data. That Georgia is a vital trade gateway for the nation. As you can see here, those desire lines, as we call them, if there were a road that went exactly as the crow flies, this is how that freight would be moving out of the central part of Georgia. Again, as sort of desire line, that central point of Georgia is not Macon producing all of these things. It is a capture of all the activity in the state of Georgia. Billions of dollars of cargo going to and from our neighboring states, as well as throughout the Southeast and even over to California. Another way that we've been able to understand the data that we have available to us is what industries are using which of our roadways. If you see the map on the right here, all those colors, usually we see this map in one single color, like a black or a gray, and that is our state network, our state roads. Trucks are allowed to use every one of our 18,000 miles of state routes, no matter where they are. So usually we just see those as lines on the map, but we were able to unpack this information to understand where food and agriculture is predominantly using our roads in South Georgia, as no surprise, as well as North Georgia. Retail and distribution is mostly around the major population center in Metro Atlanta, although you see I-16 and I-75 is important for distribution. And manufacturing is really throughout the state with a concentration on the eastern part of the state. In all of these cases, facilities are that jump off the page are I-75 and I-16, as well as I-20 and I-85. This is simply the way the freight is moving today and will continue to move throughout what we are projecting into the future. And then another way that we look at it is the value of those commodities that are moving on Georgia routes. The map on the left indicates the value of commodities for distribution. You can see that how heavy of a reliance distribution has on I-85 and I-75 in particular, as well as I-285. And then on the right is food and agriculture. So often we see trucks going down the road or cars on a railroad track. You don't know what's inside of them, and we were able to understand and look inside of those containers, so to speak, to see what commodities are moving. This is the way we look at this from a government standpoint, but we wanted to understand the way business looks at our facilities, at our network, at our performance. And so we were able to we had a freight advisory committee that was made up of major freight haulers and cargo owners throughout the state of Georgia, as well as small business representatives and government officials. And what we came up with and realized through the work, and McKinsey and Company helped us to understand from a private sector perspective that there are the 5 metrics that matter most. You'd imagine speed matters, how fast can you get somewhere, but what is even more important are 2 other metrics, cost and reliability. I'm going to show you some information about that. Safety and risk also matter. So there's 5 metrics of the way that we understand and can look at the performance of our roadways and how we can improve those. Speed, cost, reliability, safety, and risk. So what you see here is the cost view, the impact of congestion. Where there are bright colors of the oranges, reds, and pinks, that is congestion overlaid on those value of commodities that's moving. I don't have, it's hard to zoom in here, but you can see how I-75, 285 are really our problem areas. This is intuitive, but it's very interesting and important for us to see the data indicating the imperative of upgrading those facilities and providing commute options, particularly for Georgians in the area. 285 is a critical link, not just for those Metro Atlantans who need it to get to work and get around for recreational activities, but it is a critical freight corridor. Another way that businesses really look at their own supply chain logistics performance is about reliability. The map on the left here is the view of the world on a 2015 through 2019 really data set. And by 2050, it's going to get exponentially worse. I'll show you that chart in the next slide. But reliability is probably more important to more industries than any of the other metrics, because if they are able to get somewhere faster than they expected, if they are able to have lower costs than they expected to get that cargo there, that doesn't matter if they miss their delivery window. They're either ahead of time or behind schedule. That reliability to their customer is a key service level agreement in their private sector contracts. So we're paying special attention to reliability. Another view of it is through some graphics here that are not maps, but from the 2015 through 2019 data, advancing to 30 years, our freight's going to increase by 91%, almost double, and a doubling of value to $1.6 trillion of cargo moving on our Georgia roadways. And we were able to then translate that into congestion costs by industry. So manufacturing is going to double in terms of congestion cost to manufacturing. Distribution is going to have a near 4 times impact of congestion costs into their business, and that translates to higher cost to consumers for retail goods. And even food and agriculture is going to have a near doubling of congestion costs in other industries as well. So I'm going to move next to truck parking, but before I do, I wanted to see if there's any thoughts or questions on this set of material.
Doesn't appear we have any yet.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, wait a second. Let's just go ahead and Representative Holly.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Thank you for coming, and I was impressed when you talked about these freight advisory councils that it put together. Mm-hmm. Just out of curiosity, how frequent is your conversations about your transportation plan with our rail companies, Norfolk Southern and CSX, some of the bigger ones?
Good question. There are formal meetings that we have to have and enjoy having as a result of following federal regulations. Every 4 years, we have to produce a new plan and involve the Freight Advisory Committee that's officially formed. But that gives us an opportunity to understand their pressures and their interests in moving cargo so that we can take the next steps. So this year, even though we're done with our federal freight plan, we're going to engage our private partners, both in the trucking and rail industries, to look at a deeper dive set of issues. One is truck parking, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And the other is railroad crossings. I know that there's probably in every community you're noticing that there are railroad crossings that are blocked or occupied. Trains now are being built anywhere from 2 to 3 miles long, and there's just no way for them to operate without sidings, double tracking in places like that. So we're going to be working closely hand in glove with Norfolk Southern, CSX, and the short lines, but it's mostly the class ones that are building those longer trains impacting our community. So those are less formal, less required by federal, but we're still engaging with them because they have the data, they have the operations that are impacting our public roads.
Okay, that's good to know that they're going to have at least to expect that from you, and hopefully, I guess, to be able to receive from you kind of maybe a list, a plan list in terms of your projects, because I think that's, to my understanding, they're still kind of looking for that.
That's exactly right. Well, okay. For the truck parking and rail crossings, the purpose is to create the list of these are the investments we need to make in these specific communities and these specific public-private partnerships with truck parking.
Okay, thank you.
So that is forthcoming, hopefully next year.
Thank you. Okay. That's all for now.
Thank you. Truck parking is an issue. I don't know how many of you have in your districts or driven by interchanges in your districts and seen trucks overnight parked on the exit and entrance ramps. This is simply it started about 4 or 5 years ago with the execution of the electronic logging devices. In other words, there's no longer an ability for a truck driver to make that last mile or 10 miles of their journey to get to a safe parking destination. Their logging device will track it, they will get cited, and they will get a ding against their record if they drive to a safe parking place. So they pull on the side of our interstates and the side of our roadways and park in places that are not only not safe for the general public, but not safe for them either. Of course, truckers carry 80% of our cargo and our goods in this country, and the fact that they are having to take their required federal rest on the side of roadways is something we want to address, and we need to know our role, though, as a state DOT. As you can see here, of the 313,000 truck parking spaces nationwide, about 85% of those are private truck stops. That's even more pronounced here in Georgia. Of our truck parking spaces, 96% are private. Georgia DOT only owns 4% of the truck parking spaces. So we can be part of the solution, but we can't solve it all. We know that truck drivers, as they are looking for that safe place to park, if their priority is to find a safe place to park, they're going to have to curtail their hours of service. And according to the American Trucking Associations, that means about a $5,500 loss in annual compensation because they're not able to bill for those hours that they're actually serving their customers. So it's one of the top 5 challenges of our trucking industry, and 98% on a particular survey are indicating that they have trouble finding truck parking. Georgia is unfortunately one of the top 5 in the nation that has a problem for truck drivers. So we can take a look at where our data indicates there's unauthorized parking that's happening. They're allowed to park at rest areas, visitor centers, and even way stations. But these are the hot spots, so to speak, along our interstates. So we're considering what capital investments are necessary directly and through public-private partnerships and compliance with federal and state laws on truck parking. And then I'm going to talk about the Coastal Empire Study unless there's any truck parking questions.
Is that right, McCollum? Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. This is something that's near and dear to my heart because I'm in between 985 and 85 in North Georgia. So I had just a few questions. Obviously, we have Inland Port coming in, and I'm super concerned with 985. There's literally no parking for any of the trucks, and we're going to add, I've been told, 750 to 1,500 a day. I don't know if that's an accurate number or not, but so are there anything that we could do? I know there's a lot of old, well, not 985, for instance. There's an old parking area there that the DOT is using for salt. Is that something we could open back up and increase the size for truck parking on 985? And then also there's an issue there as well on them parking, like you said, on the off and on ramps. Just for a temporary type thing, I'm just curious, could we not just widen, since we already on the right of way, those ramps and potentially let them park there just for stopgap for infrastructure? And then the last question would be, I apologize, is so I've been told, and I just wanted you to clarify, so private partnerships, since it's a lot of these are federal, you can't partner with a business like you see in other states that have, restaurants and things like that. Could you just kind of fill us in on that?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Thank you.
I'll take your first questions first. In terms of where to put truck parking, just generally speaking, regardless of what type of land it is going to be practically impossible to pinpoint. We just don't know when those truck drivers' hours of service are going to run out. We can use this map as an indicator of where to put more spaces along various corridors, but we won't get it exactly right. I can tell you that much, but we can definitely address the shortage. Whether we're going to use existing assets such as the right-of-way that's maybe parking areas already or on the exit and entrance ramps, that all will be under consideration. There are operational problems with that as well. We don't really want to encourage truck drivers to park on our interstate ramps because that is not safe for them either. So there's a lot of trade-offs and discussions that we'll have to have. But we do know that the best places for truck drivers to park is somewhere that has amenities. And that's why we would do the partnerships with, those purveyors of truck parking today to help them in ways that we've done in other infrastructure sectors like broadband and electric vehicle charging, where we can provide some of the aspects that will take the risk out and support the capital investments that's necessary and let them operate to provide safe facilities and those amenities that truck drivers need while they're along the routes. Some of those other states that have truck parking in the center of the highways, they have exemptions from the federal government that date decades back, and no other states will be getting those federal exemptions, so we're not going to be able to do it quite in that way.
Let's keep it very brief.
All right. So even on the off ramps, we can't do any. Are we building any more truck parking off ramps? And we can't partner with private entities on those either because it's a federal road, correct?
That's right. So
Okay.
wherever we expand our truck parking at existing or maybe new rest areas would have to be entirely state funded, state/federal funded. We could not partner with private sector because it has direct access to the interstate. All right, I will be quick, Madam Vice Chair. I do want to talk about the Coastal Empire Study, which is a deep dive that we executed so that we could understand what's happening in the 4 counties around the Port of Savannah, which has had likely to have a 60% increase in capacity from the pandemic through 2025. What you see here on the left is what traffic looks like today. If no targeted investments, increased level investments were made, our quote level of service would turn into failing or red on almost all of the thoroughfares, and Savannah will look like Metro Atlanta without major investment. What that translates to in real terms for access to distribution and manufacturing facilities is seen here. On the left is basically today where Bryan and Effingham counties are within a 1-hour drive of the port. Some areas just 25 minutes away. Today, that means 3 to 5 loads that a truck driver can handle to and from the Port of Savannah. That will be cut in half by 2050, essentially with most of Bryan and Effingham being 2 hours away from the Port of Savannah because of traffic congestion. So with that study, we also have uncovered that there's 12 corridors that are key investment areas for widenings, as well as about a dozen intersections that we can make improvements in and increase the flow throughout that area. Lastly, I'll just say that we're, amongst other studies that we're doing, Troup County, which is where the Kia plant is, the last time they had a transportation plan was 2006. That was the year that Kia announced. It is a very different place 18 years later, so we have partnered with Troup County and the cities there to do a deep dive study. We're also studying State Route 365, which, as you know, is at the end of 985 near the inland port, and we're taking a look, too, at the Brazelton-Houston area, where there's a huge amount of distribution center growth there in Jackson County. These are amongst the other studies that we're doing. There, again, is the QR code for the freight planning analysis. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Appreciate you coming in and sharing that with us today. I believe that we have Chairman Jasper's question, comment, whatever you would like to say.
It's a question, Madam. Janine, has there been, we created some studies here toward the end, looking at our current, as I remember McCollum was asking, looking at space available on current rest areas, and I think it's a good idea you had on storage areas that we may use. I mean, have we taken a dive looking at utilizing current state assets on our roads?
Yes, we have. Planning has partnered with the engineers at GDOT to evaluate at our current rest areas. We think we could shoehorn in there another 400 spaces, which would be a 25% increase in public parking. We don't have all the funding identified for that yet, so it will take a long time for us to do that work.
Yeah. And just for me, I would love to, I should have asked you for it, and Abby may already have it. Is this McKinsey report you referred to earlier on? I don't think I've seen that. Have you seen that? If you could provide that at some point to me.
The McKinsey report
Yeah.
is found at that QR code.
Okay, so I can find it with that. All right, thank you. I thought Abby might have been hiding it from me.
You never can tell.
No, so just for committee, I just wanted to. Can you turn me back on?
Sorry.
There we go.
Sorry about that, Mr.
No,
Chairman.
just real quick, I'll just tell you, this is a lot of work that goes into this. You look at the past 3 years, we've had 3 study committees looking at all sorts of aspects of this. And this is kind of like a great kind of pathway that the planning director has given us to go forward. You look at in the budget you both voted on last week, $509 million to push the boat in the water for a lot of these projects, which I think is very important. I think it behooves us to make sure we're out in our communities talking about how important it is. Senator Doleson and I put a op-ed in the Atlanta paper this past week, and I'll make sure I share that with you the next day or so, making the case for increased spending and what it means to Georgians. And it's just like, as she said, in travel time and truck parking and all these other things that we just have to take the bull by the horns. And I appreciate the governor absolutely taking a bold step in helping us with a significant funding increase this year.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Got a question from Floor Leader McDonald, and I think that'll wrap us up.
Quick question on the, you talk about these areas with high density, the distribution centers. Have we ever thought about working with those centers and letting the trucks kind of do a campaign, hey, come park here, it's safe, don't be on the road, but pull off at this distribution center is a friendly parking place for truckers for the overnight parking, or just a thought there?
Yes, absolutely. That asphalt is already laid. It's often empty. That is private land, and the private landowner really is in control of those facilities, as well as liable for anything that happens on those facilities, which has been a barrier to those being open for truck parking.
All right. Well, seeing no more questions, thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for being here. We appreciate it. All right, and everybody, thanks for hanging in with us here. Please don't forget the committee dinner on the 21st, and you need to RSVP and let Carmen know. Carmen, is that Carmen Champion in Chairman Jasper's office. Let her know if you can be there or not. And if there's nothing else, meeting adjourned.